Welcome to the CDA Institute's Geopolitical Update. I'm Josh Malm, Director of Research and Analysis for the Institute, and I'm joined by geopolitical expert Joseph Varner, Deputy Director of the Conference of Defense Associations and former Director of Policy for the Minister of National Defense. In this podcast, Joe will provide his analysis and insights on the most significant geopolitical and international security developments of the week. So grab your headphones and get ready for a concise but comprehensive update on the world's most pressing geopolitical issues. The CDA Institute encourages rigorous debate on national security matters through our events, research, and publications. Joe, great to be with you again for the Geopolitical Update. Can you provide our listeners with a brief overview of what's been happening on the global stage this week? What are the key highlights and trends that we should be aware of before we get into more specifics?
Thanks, Josh. It's been an exciting week. We've seen the election outcome in India, which has seen Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi with a reduced seat count. We've seen NATO and the European Union warning about Russian sabotage efforts. And last but not least, we've seen Israel and Hezbollah increase their activity against one another and really look like they're moving towards war.
Thanks, Joe. Maybe to start, you could break down the results of the Indian election and its implications.
So India's recent parliamentary elections outcome came out this week, and still a little bit of information to come out of the process. But Indian Prime Minister Narendra Modi got a surprise in that his Hindu nationalist BJP party is probably going to have to join another series of parliamentary groups to form a coalition to continue his reign. This is a reign that's seen India's economic growth put it on a path to becoming the world's third biggest economy by 2027 and an important world power. And in the next little while, I think you can expect to see Modi continue this push for India to be seen as the leader of the so-called global south of non-Western nations, to see India pursue a permanent veto-wielding seat at the UN Security Council, and strengthen ties with the United States and the Quad while countering India's chief rival, China. India has already reached out to Taiwan to strengthen relations with Taipei as Beijing was left seething with anger. And one of Modi's biggest construction projects is a new submarine base in the Bay of Bengal that, when completed, will provide a sanctuary for its sea-based nuclear deterrent against both Pakistan and China. And India's Project Varner, this big submarine base, is a sprawling 1,680-acre base that will house 12 nuclear-powered ballistic missile submarines on the east coast of India.
Well, thank you very much for that, Joe. I'd like to let our listeners know that just today we put out a new piece with Rohinton Medora, Distinguished Fellow with the Center for International Governance Innovation, on the impact of Prime Minister Modi's election results. So be sure to check that out if you have time. Moving on, Joe, NATO patrol aircraft from France, Norway, and the UK have intensified surveillance off Ireland's west coast due to concerns over suspected Russian submarine activity in the North Atlantic. Can you unpack this for us a bit?
Well, NATO and the European Union are warning that Vladimir Putin's Russia is out for revenge and bent on pursuing hybrid warfare, including sabotage against the EU. It was reported last week that there was an increased level of maritime patrol aircraft activity off the west coast of Ireland by the United Kingdom, France, and Norway, all sending anti-submarine patrol aircraft to the area and over the last 3 days. This is particularly interesting because Ireland's position on the North Atlantic places it at the very heart of a vast network of undersea fiber optic cables, which carry about 97% of the world's communications and internet traffic. And these cables are vital for global communications linking Europe and North America. And the suspected Russian submarine activity is off the Irish coast in an area particularly sensitive. In August of 2021, a Russian intelligence ship was spotted in this very area, close to a submarine cable, AE Connect 1, and the planned Celtic Norse submarine communications cable route. And the main directorate of the Deep Sea Research Office in Russia is focused on underwater activities. And they operate submarines, surface vessels, and unmanned submersibles that specialize in deep sea operations, including disrupting underwater infrastructure. And we've seen China tamper with cables in both the Baltic Sea and in the waters off Taiwan. And we've seen warnings that the Houthis may actually tamper with undersea cables in the Red and Arabian Sea. And the fear is that this submarine activity that's off of Ireland's coast may be a Russian attempt to intervene with the undersea cables and sabotage them in the lead up to the European parliamentary elections.
Some great insights there, Joe. Now on to our final topic for today's episode: Israel, Hezbollah, Iran. What are the implications of the heightening tensions we're seeing now in the Middle East?
I think people should prepare themselves over the next few weeks and months as Israel and Hezbollah actually move closer to going into an all-out war. And this is likely to come to a head in the next little while over the summer months. Some 100,000 Israeli families have been evacuated from the north due to increasingly determined Hezbollah attacks from Lebanon. And I would point out that the school year begins in September, and no government, and certainly not the Israeli government, is going to be able to handle the domestic pressure of 100,000 people being homeless for months on end and kids not in school. And so I think you're going to see the Israeli government start to push back on Hezbollah in a big way in the next little while. And that could have implications that bring Iran directly into the conflict. And the issue here is that Iran continues with its strategy of ringing Israel with terrorist militia groups that are bent on the destruction of Israel, arming them, providing them with intelligence, providing them with money to do Iran's bidding, and trying to keep its own hands clean. That came to an end in April when they did the mass drone and missile attack on Israel. And in fact, they've even come out and said that they provided missile technology just recently to the Houthis. Israel is going to find themselves very soon, I think, in a position where they have to bring the war home to the Iranians to get the Iranians and their militias off Israel's back. When Iran finds out that they have to spend more time defending themselves and defending their home turf than attacking Israel, we'll see those militia groups pull back, and we'll see Tehran pull back.
As we near the end of today's episode, Joe, do you have any parting insights or reflections you'd like to leave our listeners with? Are there any other stories that they should be keeping their eyes on?
There are a few stories out there worth watching. One is Russian President Vladimir Putin's recent habit of wearing body armor to public events. And presumably he's fearing assassination and has some intelligence on that. The other is former President Donald Trump's recent criminal conviction and its impact on the U.S. election. And last but not least, Canada's unfolding political scandal around foreign influence and the accusations that Canadian politicians have acted either wittingly or unwittingly to assist foreign governments against Canadian interest, and the Trudeau government's refusal to name the accused parties in what's become an atmosphere charged by the next election, and ever-increasing leaks and revelations on this sensitive file.
Thanks, Joe, for your insights and analysis and for guiding us once again through this week's geopolitical developments. To our listeners, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to join us next week as we reconvene with Joe to delve into another week of global affairs. Until next time.